Donald Steele will be known to all of you as Britain's leading golf course architect, having worked on over 500 courses around the world, including every single venue of the Open Championship. As with so many golfers, cricket was his first love, and not only did he open the batting for the Public Schools 11 at Lord's, but also played minor counties cricket for Buckinghamshire. He is, of course, also a champion amateur golfer, qualifying to play in the Open in 1970. He was golf correspondent for the Sunday Telegraph and joined the best golf course architects practice in the land, where Ken Cotton, Charles Lorry and Frank Pennick were partners in 1965. To quote Donald, too much modern golf course architecture is the slave to colour, irrigation, power and the lob wedge. Donald continues to be involved with the turf management industry and is chairman of the Greenkeepers Training Committee. Above all for me, being author of 10 books, he has written the best ever book on links golf, published in 1992, where he captures the essence of the running courses so well that I'm sure, I make sure that I do not read his book until after I've drafted one of my reviews of a course, in case I lose what I'm trying to say in the knowledge that he says it so much better. He's been a keen supporter of Fine Golf from the start, and I thank him for joining us today.
I'm a bit worried I'm going to fall off my perch. Ladies and gentlemen, my only indelible memory from an inglorious military career was the opening sentence of an address by an inspecting general, which for sheer pomposity was hard to beat. He said, "I'd just like to say a few words before I start to speak." I don't intend to speak, so to speak, this evening. I know better than to keep good folk from their supper. But I have been asked to say a few words on two hot topics, the ball and slow play, topics I might add that were hot in 1961 when I started writing and remain hot because nothing has been done about them. As you will see from the images I have distributed from a book published in 1911, and I stress the date, they have been hot topics for an awful lot longer. The ball and slow play are important topics because they affect everybody playing the game, and nothing is more important than the protection of our courses. And the ball and the time it takes to play 18 holes are interlinked. Comparisons can rarely be exact, but the US Open at Merion in June, when Justin Rose won so splendidly, provided, quite by chance, a convenient opportunity for comparison. As many of you will have seen, Rose's drive on the 72nd hole finished right beside the plaque on the fairway from which Ben Hogan hit his celebrated one iron in 1950. Hogan hit his one iron to the front of the large 18th green, Rose his 4-iron just through the back. But the really salient point is that from the tee from which Rose played was 70 yards behind the one used by Hogan. The other item of interest was that this year's final round took more than 5 hours, whereas Hogan, in spite of finding it hard to walk after his terrible car crash the previous year, was completing his second round of the day, a custom that continued until 1965 in America and 1966 over here. There's no doubt that 36 holes on final days concentrated the mind and kept people moving, although the sad thing today is there are many players, including the top professionals, who would love to nip round in 3 hours and are perfectly capable of doing so if only they could. In 1964, when Tony Lima won at St Andrews, 45 players starting at 8 o'clock completed 2 rounds on the final day well before an early dinner. And in 1954, a field of 150 players on 2 courses at Moore Park in the Boys' Carriage Trophy were allocated 4 hours in which to play 18 holes, have lunch, and be back on the first tee for the afternoon round. It was quite normal, and nobody thought they were rushing. So why does it take so much longer nowadays? Some have been guilty of slowing the game down, and worse still, have been allowed to get away with it, thus establishing bad trends which youngsters copy. There are larger fields in the Open, bigger crowds, and modern players always seem to want more rulings. And of course, longer golf courses mean longer walks back from green to tee. So what have we learnt? The answer, I fear, is not very much. We've had enough warnings, but even sadder is the fact we make matters worse for ourselves by nullifying the distance the ball can now be hit, by distorting our courses and making scoring next to impossible. It's a pet hate seeing the indignities that courses have suffered, and there's virtually nothing that golf course architects can do to spring to the rescue. Although I fear in an attempt to do so, they have spawned an unwelcome fashion of giant carries to greens over waters or bunkers with the need to pitch the ball on a sixpence in order to get near to the pins that are barely on the putting surface. They may be all right for the best when playing at their best, but what about the rank and file? It's what you might call the very opposite of fine golf. It hasn't helped that all over the world recent new courses have been aimed at championship play, recalling again more words of Darwin, who in 1933 was ahead of the game. Everybody, he says, wants his course called a championship course. I'm not thinking of any particular course, but I hear this foolish phrase constantly used. Most courses are not fit for a championship, never will get one, and nobody wants to see one there. Then why in the name of goodness should we set up this nonsensical standard and then spoil our courses and break our backs trying to live up to it? I have quoted Darwin, but let me widen the chorus and bring in Bill Campbell, who died a fortnight ago, aged 90, because there was no more respected figure in the game. He is one of only 2 to have been president of the USGA and captain of the RNA, besides playing in 37 US Amateur Championships, 14 US Opens, and 8 Walker Cups, the last aged over 50. In accepting the Donald Ross Award from the American Society of Golf Course Architects in 2003, and speaking for himself and not for either body, his views were indisputably forceful, for the most courteous and diplomatic man I ever knew. He said specific alternatives to lengthening and widening courses obviously include making normal courses play harder by over-narrowing fairways, toughening roughs, deepening and adding bunkers, enlarging water hazards, and my pet peeve, making greens unduly hard and fast, too slick for their slopes as originally designed, and compounded by tighter hole locations. He went on, I have seen, heard, and read enough anecdotal and other evidence that I trust my general impression of what is actually happening out there and how to deal with it. In a nutshell, the phenomenon of this eye-catching, longer-hitting trend caused by new balls and clubs, as well as stronger players, swing instruction, and modern agronomy, is more easily corrected by just shortening the ball. Though politically challenging, this cure isn't rocket science or UN diplomacy. The issue cries out for attention, resolve, and action, all with a sense of urgency. The clock is ticking louder, my friends, and not just for me. 10 years on, in an article in this year's April or May Golf World, the RNA's Director of Research wrote that it was a myth that the ball flies further than ever before, quoting the fact that there's been little change in driving distance on the world's tours in that period. He says too often single shots are used as evidence of an issue rather than looking at the bigger picture. Well, the bigger picture is not all about driving distance. It includes 7 and 8 irons going 200 yards and wedges 170. At Muirfield in July, one 379-yard par 4 was reduced to a 7-iron and a sand wedge, while another leading player asks, when you can hit a 2-iron 350 yards, why take a driver? In 1987, also at Muirfield, Sandy Lyle went round in terrible weather in 71 without once hitting a wooden club. Since then, great driving has become such a fading art that Tiger Woods won the Open without the aid of a driver. Hogan would have turned in his grave because his generation had to drive well simply to survive. Nobody is really happy with today's situation, and nobody pretends current administrators have caused the problem, but rather like the global economy, they've inherited the hot potato and nobody else can sort it out. Slow play is a collective responsibility that needs the backing of every golfing body everywhere. A concerted campaign is required. 5 and 6 hour rounds are no fun for spectators and are denting the attraction and popularity of the game. In addition, Greg Norman maintained a while back that today's game is less spectacular than it was in the 1980s, the heyday of himself, Tom Watson, Seve, Nick Fowler, Nick Price, Bernard Langer and Sandy Lyle. Oh, that the clock could have been stopped then. It was a time when courses could still cope and rebound, although Muirfield and the National Golf Links of America last weekend showed yet again that fast-running courses are a more potent force than those irrigated to death. However, for all the rising skills of our worthy greenkeepers, courses can only be prepared and presented to order with the weather's cooperation, and it rarely cooperates. As you will see from the strangely prophetic messages in the cartoons that I have distributed, a suitable caption to one showing the 1 mile, 270-yard par 3 might be, "Don't say we didn't warn you." It has certainly taken a while for the penny to drop, but it's never too late. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, will you now retire and consider your verdict?